The earliest memory that I actually have is when I was a very young kid, being a little curious about um, other boys, and I just figured it was a curiosity that all kids have, and it may have been. Didn't make much of a big deal of it. I had a friend in second grade that I wondered if other boys felt like this towards their friends, but it wasn't a big deal. I just kind of let it go. And then in junior high, there was the constant effort not to look at other attractive young men. I noticed that the guys around me would be drooling at the cheerleaders in their mini skirts, and then, in their little skirts, and I was not as interested in that. I couldn't understand why they were so out of control of themselves, what was going on. But didn't equate that with my concerted effort not to look at, say, the football players running around, running their laps shirtless. And for me, I explained it with things like, I'm curious, I'm jealous of them, I want to be like them, I am idolizing them. It was just this explanation I gave myself. I wasn't used to that. I didn't look like that, and so I was fascinated. And I punished myself for making more of that curiosity than needed to be made. I guess I sort of blamed myself for letting those thoughts get out of control and becoming something more of a fascination than probably what should have just been a curiosity. I figured maybe other guys kind of had that kind of curiosity, they just didn't talk about it. So I didn't talk about it. I just kind of kept it to myself, and if I was making more of it, if I was turning these thoughts into something more than they needed to be, I needed to deal with that. I could handle it, and I would not burden anybody else with my problem. So I didn't talk about it. Looking back, it was probably more stress on me than I realized at the time, but I just kind of pushed it away. I had my explanations of it, and I moved on. Went on a mission. That was actually a great experience for me at the time. I fully believed in what I was doing. I was focused on the purpose for being there, and so for me, the same-sex attraction, homosexuality, was not an issue while I was on my mission. I had a little bit of a crush on a companion, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. And as far as the thoughts went, I figured it was just what other elders or missionaries dealt with, with their feelings towards girls. It just, whatever, you keep it within check. But I still had not equated my curiosity and fascination with the feelings that straight guys or most guys had. I just figured it was this fascination that there was something wrong with me for not being able to keep that down and under control. After my mission, of course, I wanted a family. I wanted to get married, I wanted to have kids, and I figured that was in my future. I just didn't feel the urgency that a lot of other guys feel. I was always kind of picky and selective and not as fixated on the physical stuff. I figured that my priorities were more the spiritual connection, the emotional connection, because that's what was most important. And so I didn't let myself be too bothered by the lack of physical or sexual attraction towards girls. I figured that was a reflection of my priorities more than an orientation issue. And so I tried to date. My style was more get to know on a friendship level and let things go from there. Dating was such a chore. It was taxing to just ask somebody out and go out to dinner on a Friday night. I didn't understand why people enjoyed it. But the getting to know each other and just letting it build from there was great. Problem is, it didn't get past a certain point. And in my early to mid-20s, I was actually with a really good friend, somebody I really cared about, and she looked at me a certain way that I just realized I couldn't return it. And I cared about her so much that I wanted her to be with somebody who could really return that, who could look back at her with that same look in their eyes that she was looking at me. And I knew I cared about her, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to figure this out. I knew something was missing, but I didn't know what. And I had kind of had this experience with other girls in the past, and that was my crisis point where I realized I don't know how many times I can go through this with great girls and hit this wall. And at that point, I told her I needed to let her go. I felt like I was keeping her from exploring. And I actually talked to my bishop at that point, who was great. He was kind. He admitted that he doesn't have all the answers, but that we can focus on spirituality, testimony, behavior. But he had visited with other people who had experienced this, and he didn't know if it actually changes. But he wanted me to find out what I could and report back. And so we worked together, and that's when I joined some online support groups, which was huge for me to be able to process all of this that had been going on inside of me and actually find out that other people had had similar thoughts and get their ideas back. And it was about 2 years after that that I finally met somebody in person that was a friend. And for me, meeting the first other gay Mormon, although I did not use the term gay at that time, I felt that that came with identity and baggage that I didn't apply to myself. But that was huge because it was not just an anonymous name, it was not just a pseudonym in a group, but it was somebody that I could actually see, talk with, interact with, and see for his whole self. And we're still good friends today, but that was a big thing for me, to be able to start talking to people in person and really working through it. And it was around that time that I started to become more comfortable with myself, and I realized that these feelings were more what everyone else experiences, just directed at a different gender. And I have a really good straight friend that I've talked with all along since high school, and I've just found over the years that the experiences are very similar. There's a lot that's the same, and it's just a matter of who you fall in love with or who you're attracted to. Well, when I first talked with my bishop, I hadn't spoken with anybody before about the feelings even. I'd never approached them directly. I'd been increasingly aware that this was maybe not a phase, this was not a curiosity that was just going to go away on its own, and I needed to really deal with some things and really figure out where I could go with this. But he was great from the standpoint that, on one hand, I wanted somebody to tell me, this is what you're going to do with this. This is what you've got to, this is the answer, this is the formula, and there's a way to change this. There's a way to make this work. There's whatever. On the other hand, I really appreciated that he admitted that he wasn't sure, and that he had visited with other people, and they had been working to change, but he had to be honest that he hadn't seen a lot of actual change in the sense of changing the feelings. And on one hand, that rang true, and on the other hand, I wanted hope in the form of they can change. I've seen other people do this, and I guess I felt a little bit let down that didn't come from him. Of course, over time, that has changed, but at the time, it was both unsettling and strangely felt right, I guess. And so we really did just focus on testimony, self-image, what to do with it, as opposed to how to change it. And that, I think, was really helpful for me. Calling my bishop was not necessarily a sudden or easy decision. I guess I'd been thinking in some ways about it. But that day, after I had told this girlfriend of mine that I had some things I needed to work out, I went home and I knew that I needed to talk to somebody. And I didn't want it to be somebody that, just some random person who was going to tell me that I should go just live a gay lifestyle or whatever. I wanted it to be my bishop because I wanted it to be within the context of, my church upbringing, my beliefs, my whole social life was with the church. I wanted it to be from an ecclesiastical leader, a religious leader. And I grabbed my phone and I sat, I think I was in my car because I didn't want to be anywhere where anybody could overhear. Or I was thinking I was going to have to drive straight there because it was such an urgent issue. It was such an emergency that I was just going to have to drive straight to where he was to talk to him. And my hands were shaking as I thought about how this could blow up my whole life, my whole identity, because I was Mr. Discipline. I was, Institute Council President, the president of the LDS Student Association at the university, and I didn't want that to all fall apart, and I didn't want this to become the way people know me, the first thing people think about when they think of me. I was really afraid that I would be the guy that we used to respect, and now he's gay. And it was terrifying. I called him, and I told him what was going on. My voice was trembling, and I was a little disappointed when he said, "Well, let's make an appointment for next week," because I was expecting, oh, this is a big deal. And to me it was. But I didn't tell him what the issue was at the time, now that I think about it. I just told him that there was something that I really needed to talk to him about. I went into the office for the interview, and he looked tentative because he could tell that I was shaken. Because again, in my mind, my life is about to fall apart. He might accidentally tell somebody, somebody's going to know, somebody's going to wonder why I was here, whatever. And I told him that I had this issue, and I didn't have the words for it. I didn't know how to talk about it, but he kind of gave a look, nodded for a bit, and I was left there terrified as to what he was trying to control. And he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, a few things make sense now. I've had these girls coming into my office trying to figure out how they can get Jay's attention, and so puzzled that they just can't catch his eye." And that was actually really good for me because I was able to laugh through tears at the comedy of it, and I knew that he was okay, that he was going to deal with this. That this wasn't blowing apart his image of me. And at the end of the interview, he did give me a big hug, and that was big. I forgot how big that was. Because that was the first time somebody knew this freakish thing about me, and it didn't seem to really change anything. If anything, I felt like he saw me as more human. And that was a big deal for me. It was very affirming in just a personal, human way, and I appreciate that.